Welcome to Innovation Illuminated, a podcast where guest entrepreneurs and experts in the field of business share their experiences and knowledge learned through their journey in the business world. I am your host, Hunter Pirok, and similar to these guests, I am also an entrepreneur. Today's guest is Marc Smathers. Marc is a professor in the business program at WCTC, Waukesha County Technical College. Marc and I discuss his employment as a young kid working a postal job delivering papers, to Pizza Hut in high school, then eventually to talking on radio, and also working at GMR Marketing. We delve deep into GMR Marketing and talk about their niche market and their marketing strategies on how they target customers and onboard clients. We also talk through how Marc lays out a plan when he gets a job to how he's going to grow through the company to eventually get to where he wants to be at his goal job. I hope you enjoy this one, and thanks for tuning in to Innovation Illuminated. Thanks for coming on. This is super exciting.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I've been looking forward to it all week, and I'm nervous because you're good at talking on a microphone already.
You have such a presence. Don't worry about it.
Oh, thank you so much. But I'd like to start. With all my guests talking about some jobs that you had or growing up, some experiences that you had in the workforce.
Yeah, I think probably like a lot of people of my age, grew up delivering papers. So I had a paper out when I was 12 years old, and back then you'd not only deliver the papers, but you had to knock on the door and collect their subscription once every month. You have a little tear-off pad, and I had a little changer thing, so I felt like I was a businessman at age 12. And when I was 15, I was sitting around and I thought, you know what, I really like to try to make some money. So I jumped on my bike and I drove down a hill to a Pizza Hut near my house and went in and asked if they were taking applications, and they did, and called me back. So I worked at Pizza Hut for probably 3 or 4 years while I was in high school, and it was fun to have a job where you got a chance to be around. This is where everybody go after a football game or after a cross country. So I had all my friends coming in trying to get free pizza out of me and things like that. But I started that job, and I think I was making $1.35 an hour.
No way.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
So was that like the minimum wage, or was that just what Pizza Hut was paying?
That back then, a minimum wage didn't really mean a lot. It was kind of whatever the market would bear.
Yeah.
And honestly, it wasn't a bad wage at the time. It just was one of those things where I just wanted a job and I wanted to do something, and so I had some pocket change and had a chance to kind of learn a lot about human nature and people and dealing with people. So.
And customer experiences, I'm sure too.
Yeah.
How much did the paper job pay? Do you know?
Oh, gosh.
Remember?
All I know is that if I didn't collect everything, I didn't get my full commission. So I mean, if I made maybe $30 a month, it would be that would be a lot.
Wow, that's crazy. So you worked at Pizza Hut during high school?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And following high school, did you go to college?
Yeah, I went to Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Okay.
Started out, I was actually a music major for the first 3 years of my career, and then ended up flunking music theory 3.
Oh, no.
And it was actually a great experience because I got a note over the summer from the head of the department that said, you might want to consider a different area of interest. And it was one of those things where I was so passionate about music in high school. I had a really good music teacher. I played trumpet and loved playing in jazz bands. So I thought that's what I wanted to do. And it really wasn't what I wanted to do. It was something that I enjoyed, and it was more of a hobby than anything else. So it was, at that point I kind of decided I was going to look at speech communications, and so I got my degree in it was a triple major called speech communications, theater, media education.
Okay. So what were the classes like entail for speech? Was it a lot of public speaking?
A lot of public speaking classes, a lot of writing classes. Because of theater, a lot of acting, and I actually didn't do a lot of acting, but I did a lot of set design and things like that. So
that's cool.
It was fun, and it was a degree that when you look back, it is one of those things that the field I went into really has very little to do with what I did, and also has a great deal to do with what I did. So when I got into marketing, I had not taken a marketing class in my entire career.
No way, really?
Yeah.
Okay, but your schooling helped you a lot with the marketing job.
It helped me with the communication aspect of it. It helped me with the dealing with individuals. It helped me understand how to really kind of read people, negotiate, do things that you started figuring out how to influence people and trying to get them to go along with your ideas or buy into your premise. So it was kind of the premise of, business as a whole.
Yeah. Okay. And when did that opportunity at GMR Marketing come up?
So that was 1988. I was actually, I had spent the first 10 years of my career doing some radio and television. I was working down in Chicago, commuting to a company called Public Interest Affiliates, and it was a syndication company that had thousands of radio stations that they fed syndicated radio programs to, sports programming, public interest programming. So we'd bring people into the studio, we'd do interviews with them, we'd, didn't do it electronically. It was all on tape, so you're splicing together programs. And
no way.
It was a blast. I mean, I really enjoyed what I was doing, but I was commuting 2 hours a day. I had to get there in the morning by like 7 o'clock so I could do some satellite feeds that would go out to some of the different stations. So at one point I told my wife, I said, I've got to find something else. This is just weighing too heavy on me. And I had worked in radio in Milwaukee at a radio station by the name of WLUM. It was owned by Willie Davis at the time. And WLUM was an urban station that was, I enjoyed my time there, but it was one of those things where I was never going to really grow. I had applied for some positions to try to move up the ladder. And the secretary there sent me a note. We were good friends. She said, hey, there's this company called GMR, and they're in New Berlin. At the time, they were in Brookfield. And they're looking for somebody to do radio promotions. And I said, okay. So I sent my resume to them. And the funny thing was I didn't tell anybody in Chicago that I was looking for a job. And I happened to know the receptionist, and I had faxed my resume down to GMR, and they only got one page of it. And one of the women there faxed back to my company that I was working at the time saying, we didn't get the second page of your resume. Could you please send it again? So she ended up bringing in and said, Mark, you probably don't want people to see this. So, so anyway, I interviewed. It was on a Saturday, I remember, because I couldn't really take the time off in Chicago. And the owner, Gary Reynolds, came in. He had just gotten done running 10 miles, I think. And the operations manager, Brian Buskey, who was there, came in and sat down with me for about an hour. And I look back on this, and I actually use it in some of my classes. It was probably the most bizarre interview I've ever had because I think he asked me one question, and then he went on to tell me about the company. And
oh, really? So he was just talking?
He was just talking almost all the time.
Huh.
And he said, so that's how we got started. That's what we were doing. That's where we're going. But he was a true entrepreneur, and he was somebody that you could tell he was going to be successful at whatever he did. And I left, and I thought, okay, I hope I get this. I hope I get this. And I called like every week. So haven't made a decision yet. Haven't made a decision yet. Haven't made it. And finally, I'd just about given up. It was 3 months, and I hadn't heard back from him.
Okay.
And I said, I'm going to just give one last call. And I called up, and I said, is Brian there? Because he was a person I was going to talk to. And all of a sudden, Gary picked up the phone. He goes, hey, yeah, you want the job? I said, yeah. He goes, okay, you start tomorrow. I said,
what?
I've got to give a week's notice. He goes, oh, okay, well, do what you have to do, but just, so you'll take the job? I said, yeah, okay. All right, we're all set? Okay, bye. And that's how it ended. So, and that's kind of how things were done around there. And, I think about people who are entrepreneurs, it's just, they just move so quickly. I mean, it's like they don't let the grass grow behind them. If something doesn't work, discard it and move on. And
spur of the moment decisions.
Yep. So I went in and spent like the first week getting to know a little bit about the process and procedures, which at that time there really weren't a lot. But then my first assignment was I had to go down to Texas. They were having a big promotion around Miller Lite. It was called the biggest party in the history of Texas. And they had ZZ Top, The Who, Dennis Quaid was the spokesperson. And so I had to go into all the Miller distributors and sell in this promotion to get them to buy in to be part of it. So that started my career with GMR, and spent the next 5 years working pretty much in the beer business.
Okay. So that was the niche market, was beer business for what you were working with? Or was GMR more of a bigger agency that it covered pretty much any industry?
They would tell you that at that time.
Okay.
There were 30 people that worked there. Their primary clients were their first one was Miller Brewing Company.
Okay.
Their second one was Apple Computers. And
wow.
Part of the reason being is Gary founded the company based on being able to connect to the college audiences. And so Miller used to have college reps, and these reps would go in and they'd be students, and they'd put them on payroll and say, try to get people to go to Miller events and buy Miller beer and do that. So back in that day, it was it was Anheuser-Busch and Miller, and they just
Okay.
fought tooth and nail to get the biggest share of the business. And to be honest with you, I thought Gary did a phenomenal job by matching bands with the brand. And he would have bands play underneath the Miller Genuine Draft or Miller High Life banner. And these bands wouldn't get paid anything. What they'd get is they'd get free promotion, they'd get free equipment, because Gary cut deals with some of the big music distributors. And it turned into a very successful program, and he parlayed that into getting a hold of the head of marketing at Apple Computers and saying, listen, we have this network of colleges that we can implement at a moment's notice. And really what he did is he said, listen, we can plug and play Apple in there. And Apple was very big into trying to get into the student. They had reseller networks throughout all the colleges. And so we would do all of the Apple ads and do the promotions around Apple. And so that was the start of that company, which at the time really was just 2 clients.
That's crazy. So it was more so the young demographic that they were going for.
Yeah, 18 to 34.
For all the brands that they did business or did advertising
primarily
for.
At that time.
Okay.
And the growth of an agency has to take a look at where it is they want to go, and that was one of the things that Gary was very great at seeing. 5 years down the line, he was talking about podcasts 10 years ago when nobody was listening to him. Yeah.
Oh wow, very interesting. So you worked there from 1988 to 2017. How did things change from the start to finish in the advertising space?
Well, in 1998, we were officially acquired by a big conglomerate by the name of Omnicom. Omnicom owned, I think, 260 or more agencies at the time. And they owned the big advertising agencies like BBDO, TBWA, Chiat Day, DDB, and then they bought some smaller ones. But they also owned most of the major PR agencies as well, Ketchum, Fleischman Hillard. And then started realizing that big growth was coming in the healthcare space. So they started buying medical specialty companies. And then Gary sold them the company, and it was the first experiential company that Omnicom had ever owned. So they gave him license to say, if you want to grow, exponentially, you can, and he did. He started to do some acquisitions of other agencies that had specialties in sports. We had been doing sports. We just hadn't been, we weren't like
pounding it like somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, there were some companies out there that's all they did was sports.
Yeah,
we were doing primarily music promotions and dabbling in sports. One of the first large clients that we had in sports was Miller when they had the Association of Volleyball Professionals, AVPs, beach volleyball. So that was worked on that promotion as well.
Okay. And how do you get, as an agency, how do you get people like onboarded? Like, I know you said that they just talked to Apple. Is there a big process like emailing the head of marketing there to try to get their budget to you?
Yeah, and there's requests for proposals that would come out, and you'd try to get on that list to have them send you the RFPs and those or requests for information to basically provide your credentials. And it was a very interesting process during my career, because it used to be if you could get on somebody's RFP list, you probably were guaranteed to get some sort of business somewhere down the line.
Okay.
After a while, a lot of the marketing people within the corporate entities would use that to try to solicit free creative ideas. And that was another thing that I think Gary did a great job at, was he realized that we aren't going to give away free ideas. I mean, we're going to be a company that, we'll present the idea, and if you buy it from us, we'll implement it. And so that was one of the ways. We had several salespeople, very good salespeople, that would go out and solicit business. One of the things that we constantly did was looked at the trades and found out like maybe who wasn't happy with their agency at the time. And there was a couple of times where we were proactive. We had an idea and took it directly to the company and said, this was a great company, or this is a great idea. One of those was one of our salespeople from New York, and he realized that Tonka was going to have their 50th anniversary, or I think it was maybe their 100th anniversary. And so he said, I'll get a meeting with Tonka and let's come up with what the idea is. So we developed this national tour that was going to showcase all the Tonka through the years, and went in and presented it. They bought it and took it around for a year. And it was, a one-off client for a while, but it was one of those things where we were proactive in looking for the opportunity.
Okay. So the process of getting one of those big jobs, you kind of propose what you're going to do for them and kind of the result that they'd possibly get. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
and now because of digital marketing and all the data and AI that's out there, you almost have to guarantee some type of return on investment to be able to make it worth their while. There was a Wild West time where people would just say, "Come in with a great idea and we'll give it a try." Those days are somewhat over because you can figure out that if your spend isn't going to generate the return that you need, that you're probably going to find an alternative agency to work with.
Gotcha. I want to touch on a little bit of, I feel like a fad or something super popular is like kids my age starting SMMA businesses, social media marketing agencies. And I've seen it everywhere that people are saying that it's like the easiest business to scale. How would you say that somebody could scale one of those businesses to onboard their first client and eventually grow it into multiple?
Well, I think, and it is, such a interesting area of business because your generation lives and breathes it. I mean, it's basically you grew up with it. It's easy to plug and play. And I tell all of my students when they tell me that they're doing a little thing here, a little thing there, I said, there's plenty of companies out there that could use your expertise. I think it's getting one client and proving that with that client that you've gotten success for them. I've seen several people who have started small businesses and marketed it themselves. There's a need for people to go into businesses that have been established for years that might not have a website and say, listen, I can help you change how you do business. I worked for another entrepreneur down in Kenosha, and he had a magazine. And after I left GMR, he said, hey, I want to go out and pick your brain about some stuff. And he said, what could I be doing different? And I said, honestly, you don't have a digital presence. You're a piece of paper that is dwindling. Nobody's picking it up anymore. How can you be more relevant in the marketplace? And so he did. He hired a young, upcoming social media marketing person who started actually doing podcasts and started talking about things happening in Kenosha. So now he's got not only the magazine, he has a radio show, and then he's got his social media platform that is all kind of working together as an integrated marketing campaign.
Oh, wow. Okay. So yeah, so I see how you could onboard the first customer, and then do you want to like get them to say a review to get the second customer? Is that how you kind of expand it?
Well, yeah. I mean, you definitely want to make sure that you did a good job and that they have good things to say about you. But I think, I know a lot of people that I used to work with that were social media experts at GMR, and they've all gone off, and I shouldn't say all, most of them gone off and started their own small little niche business. A lot of reasons was during COVID, some of the jobs started going away, and they might have taken a client and kind of opened up the door and said, let me just kind of freelance with you for a while. Yeah. Take that and then parlay that into other people. And to be honest with you, word of mouth still is one of the best forms of advertising. Yeah. If somebody says, Hunter's, podcast is the best, people are going to go, I'm going to tune in, take a listen. So
right. Yeah. And do you know if that guy, or I know it's super popular that the person that starts SMMA just outsources all the work. So they're the person that just like onboards the client, talks to the client, but then they outsource like all the advertising. So they have somebody like maybe in a different state or something on Fiverr, they hire them to do all the work.
Well, yeah, the crowdsourcing of a lot of this stuff has become another cost saving measure for a lot of companies. There are a lot of people I worked with that went out and started what they call collectives, which is, I know somebody in this space, I know somebody in that space, I know somebody in that space. So if I have a client, I can say, I have these 3 resources that'll go against your business. There's another one called The Bench, which is a woman that used to work for us, and she wanted to specialize in basically sports marketing, and her whole thing was I've got a bench, I've got a bunch of people that I can reach out to and put in the game. So you just let me know what you need, and I'll help piece that together. So crowdsourcing and outsourcing has really made it very cost effective. But I do know a lot of people that are great at social media. I know a lot of people that are great at SEO and able to just kind of step in and just take over a small business and help them elevate their digital footprint to the point where they become a little bit more well known in the marketplace.
Okay. And back to the getting a first client, how do you think somebody could reach out to a business to try to get them to do advertising for them?
Well, I think that people that need digital marketing probably aren't going to Facebook or online or websites to look at stuff. They're probably just, figuring out, what they can do. So I honestly think start looking for companies that don't have a social media footprint and knock on their door and just say, hey, I was noticing this. I'll be honest with you, there'll be plenty of no's in the process, but you're going to find that one person that's going to say, you know what, I think I need that. I would like to give it a try. And all of a sudden, and that, I go back to how Gary started his business, is he wanted to put bands with brands. He shopped it around to Pabst and some other companies, and finally he went to Miller, and he said, he had one person nod his head, say, yeah, this is a great idea. We'll buy into it. And he said, at that point, I knew that there's no stopping us. So,
Can you expand on or talk about your whole career at the GMR Marketing?
I started out, what they call an account coordinator. So my first job was I worked under a director that oversaw the Miller business. And what my role was to primarily help on development of a concept. I did some writing, the proposals. Back when I first started, PowerPoint didn't exist, so you wrote things in longhand, or you had things customized, or you went to printers to have them design and do all that element. And through that, doing that for probably 2 or 3 years, I ended up becoming a director within the organization. And so I had some people that would work with me, had several talented people that helped me kind of build some of the client base. GMR was such a small client. It was so family owned. There wasn't a lot of talk about promotions when I first started there. It was pretty much, you came in, you're part of the associates. It was Gary M. Reynolds and Associates. And I'll never forget one of the first proposals I wrote. I gave it to the guy who headed up operations, and he marked it all up and read and gave it back to me. And he said, anytime it says I, change it to we. And so I went, okay, all right, I get it.
Yeah.
So we're working together on this. And it was a great learning experience. And so from there, I kind of just, I went through lots of change. I mean, companies culturally will change when you start growing exponentially, and also physically. I mean, we had everybody on the same floor when we first started in Brookfield. Then we moved over on Calhoun to a 4-story or 3-story building, and it really kind of changed the dynamics of how people interacted. You started seeing silos because you'd have one team on this floor and one team on that floor, and that's when you start seeing kind of a chink in the armor, and you start going, okay, the communication isn't that good anymore.
Yeah.
We aren't talking about what we're doing. Everybody's just got their nose to the grindstone. And so it wasn't until we kind of started looking at what was the best practices of the organization. How could we really try to make sure that people look at the company as a place where they can grow. So they started doing regular meetings with the organization. We had people would come in and they would talk about their best practices. They would show their promotions. And it was one of those things where people nod their head and they go, holy cow, I had no idea we do so much.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden divisions would start talking and say, well, if you can do this for them, couldn't we do this for our client over here? And we had a very kind of, when we first started, it was kind of the Miller team and the Apple team. And then as it grew, it was kind of the sports team and then the entertainment team.
Okay.
And so I think just through some strategic hires, we had a lot of talented people that Gary brought in from Miller Brewing Company that had seen the structure at Miller. And one of the stories I talked about is we brought somebody in from Miller. She was a pretty high up executive, and after about 3 months, she said, "Mark, can we go out and have a beer?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." She goes, "I don't know who reports to me. I don't know who I report to. I don't, it was just a structural thing. She was brought in to run projects."
Okay.
And so at that point I said, maybe we should figure out how to, structure. So Gary and Brian said, well, why don't you put a team together and figure out how to start looking at, the organization as a whole. And it really helped out a great deal, not only from the standpoint of showing people within the organization what the company does, but also kind of putting together a career path. Somebody could look at it and say, you know what, I see what they're doing right now. That's what I'd like to do in 5 years. So putting them in that career path, providing more training. When we started, there wasn't an HR department. There was one person that handled HR, accounting, physical plant. And we started bringing in quality HR people that brought in some good talent.
Okay. And like you said, I feel like it's super important to have clarity in the business. Like I just had the meeting with Skipper Buds today, and we kind of were like not seeing the same thing with. So for example, I'm partnered with a board company, Hyperlight Board Company, through Skipper Buds, and we weren't clear on like how the deal was going down or like what price I was getting the boards for. Am I buying them from Skipper Buds or is Hyperlight giving them to me and whatnot? And so we had a meeting and we kind of cleared the air and really learned what the deal is and just cleared everything up, like you were saying, about like structure of how a deal works or how an organization and partnership is working, because I feel like it's super important to know that, and not, it's important to have the conversation or the meeting because you're never going to get to it if you don't have it.
Well, and some of those conversations aren't the most fun conversations to have.
Totally not, yeah.
And but if you don't broach them, the communication breaks down.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to have problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to talk about, did you have any mentors in your life?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Plenty. Probably. What? And
sorry for interrupting you, but did you separate them out to different aspects of your life, like a business mentor, a personal mentor, relationship mentor?
Yeah, I mean, my parents, I grew up in just a wonderful family. So I had a mom and dad that were very nurturing, very thoughtful, very encouraging. I also had some coaches through high school that, particularly a track coach that was very important to my personal growth. Like I said, I was a music major, and I had a music teacher that I really I spent a lot of time, talking with her and learning from her about things. She would actually, help me expand my musical interests and by taking me to some pretty interesting concerts. Probably one of the biggest mentors I had was the person who was the operations, the chief operating officer of GMR. His name was Brian Buskey. And Brian was my kind of direct report when I first started there. And he was just one of those people that would tell it like it was. I mean, there was no sugarcoating it. And he would bring me into his office and just say, shut the door, shut the door. I'm like, okay, what do I do now? And he'd just say, okay, here's how you handled it. I wouldn't do it this way. Here's what I would do is I would look at it this way. And then, or if something went wrong and maybe Gary was upset with something that I did, Brian would say, okay, here's what happened, and this is what you need to do to rectify it. And it was just one of those little things where he tweaked kind of how I interacted with people. And he was one of those people that he mentored quite a few people within that organization. Unfortunately, he died, I think back in 2013 or 14. Mm-hmm. And but he was definitely, every good entrepreneur needs kind of a person that's kind of helping to keep the team together. And Brian was one of those people that could do that.
Wow, very interesting. How would you find your passion? I know a lot of people like myself struggle to find something that we're passionate about, or in the business world, what to go for, what to grab for. Did you find your passion in marketing?
I did. I found my passion in people. I just enjoy being around people. And I did some selling while I was there, but I wouldn't call myself a salesperson. I did a lot of creative thinking and coming up with ideas, but I wouldn't call myself a creative person. I was more of a connection person. I love trying to find two working people that could make something better.
Yeah.
So later on, when we were acquired by Omnicom, one of the things that I got a chance to do was to go out to New York and some of the other major offices and get to meet a lot of the ad execs, some people in specialty marketing, and just provide some networking entities. And what I did is put together a group of people in Chicago that would get together once a month and just share best practices, talk about new client opportunities. We created these pods that allowed us to build a little bit broader scope for a client that might need a PR aspect to their business or might need a digital aspect to their business, and trying to bring them all together.
Mm-hmm. And now you're taking your passion to teaching, I believe, correct?
Well, it's interesting because when I decided to leave GMR, I started thinking about things I wanted to do. And two things I mentioned to my wife was I'd love to teach, and I wouldn't mind getting back into radio. So that's what I did when I started out. And it wasn't more than probably 3 months into that. I'd been an adjunct here for a year, and I got a phone call from Ed and Ann here saying, hey, there's going to be an opening, and if you're interested, why don't you apply for a full-time job? So I did, and it was that same week I got a phone call from this guy at the local radio station in Racine who said, hey, Mark, I ran across a videotape of you. I used to host post-prom for the Racine School District. And,
you did?
Yeah.
Really?
And so he goes, I just, saw that you've done some TV, and I just wondered, I said, well, I used to do radio too. And he goes, really? He goes, would you be interested in filling in? This guy is, he works for a syndicated TV radio show where he covers the Green Bay Packers. So whenever there's a Packers game, he'd look for somebody to fill out or fill in. So I would, during training camp, I would go in and fill in for a couple of weeks for him while he did that. And so, my dream came true. I mean, literally about 3 months after I left, I had a full-time job teaching, and I was dabbling back into radio.
Yeah, that's funny. I want to hear a funny story about some radio. Do you have a funny experience? Like you said, prom. Did you interview people after prom?
Well, see, it's interesting. I come from, if anybody knows anything about Racine, and there's actually a documentary out there on, it's called The World's Best Prom or something like that. Yeah. And so back in, I think the 50s or so, I think somebody got in a car accident going to prom, drinking or something. And the Kiwanis, or one of the organizations down there, said, we should try to find a safe place for all those people to come for prom. And so they took all of the public schools and the parochial schools and had their prom at one location. So Case High School, Horlick High School, Lutheran, St. Cat's, they all have a prom. And it became a huge thing where they would come down to Festival Hall in downtown Racine, and people would try to figure out the coolest way to arrive with their prom date.
Yeah.
They had people come in on an elephant.
No way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What?
They had, people would have their dad in their semi-truck, coming down and honking their horn. My son, when he went to prom, came in on Segways. But I think the Wienermobile's been there.
What? So, that's a good one.
And so it became such a big deal that local cable affiliates said, we should probably cover that. So myself and another woman there would host that periodically. I used to do that, and then they also have Racine has the largest 4th of July parade, so I would do the play-by-play of that. And so he had run across that tape, and that's how he said, are you interested in getting back into radio?
So it's like a play-by-play of people arriving to prom?
Yeah.
Really?
And then you interview the king, queen, and learn a little bit about, what the highlights were of their careers. And it was an interesting thing. And, to be honest with you, it had tons of viewers because all the parents were at home going, watch my kid. So.
For sure. We did a parade a couple years ago. I think the Heartland Hometown Parade it was called or something. And I got a kick out of, I watched the thing to see myself in it or whatever in our boat. And it was funny. He's like, here comes Surf Lake Country. And talking about the boat and stuff. I just thought it was so funny. And I feel like that'd be a lot of fun. Was it fun doing the prom?
It was a blast. Yeah, it really was. And doing the parade was too. There were a couple, they would, at the time, anything they could generate some revenue on for sales, they would try to do. And there was the big thing down there, fishing tournament called Salmonorama. Ooh. And they go down and cover 6 hours of people bringing in their fish and weighing their fish and eating cheese curds and drinking beer.
So did you have a setup there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I never did work Salmonorama, but they did that, and they did all the local softball games. It was, you don't see that too much anymore.
Yeah. I feel like you don't see it at all. What's the coolest person you'd say that you've interviewed, or most interesting that you enjoyed?
Oh, let's see. I'll tell you the nicest person that I've ever met and interviewed was Jamie Lee Curtis. She was I used to do a TV show called Take Two, and we went down to where they were filming a movie, and we got a chance to interview her, see Thomas Howell and a couple of other people in the movie. And we got done with the interview, and I told somebody who was there, I said, do me a favor. I said, I'm going to go stand by her, take my picture. And so I walked over and stood by her. She goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm just going to have my, well, then come over here. And she just grabbed me and put me in a headlock and took my picture. But no, I'll tell you that, from just, day-to-day people, there's so many people at this college that I absolutely thoroughly enjoy talking to that are just the nicest people that, have given me so much guidance. I mean, when I came here, I was scared to death of, how to handle things, and just gave me some great advice as far as, sometimes, you're going to make mistakes, sometimes you're going to have a bad class, and you just, suck it up and learn that. But, there are people that, I would say Gary Reynolds is one of the people that I admire. Another gentleman by the name of Frank Carmichael, who I told you owns magazines down in Kenosha, just down to earth person, willing to give advice, willing to this is one thing about entrepreneurs that I like is they understand that you might make mistakes, and I'm not one of those people that probably would have done well in a business that was run by a very structured environment. So having that ability to learn along the way has really been key to my career, I think.
Yeah. So Gary was very hands-on.
Oh yeah. Matter of fact, early on, nobody got hired at that company unless he had a chance to talk to him.
Really?
So, yeah.
Okay. And did he believe in no hierarchy, really? Like you didn't have to come talk to this person to talk to him. He talked to anybody at the...
Doors always open.
Yeah.
And it was that until the day he left. And a couple of the executives there were the same way. It's like, we're all in this together. And one of the times that I remember probably 3 or 4 years into working there, and I'd been working on Miller business, most of my career. And I was walking out and was kind of, not feeling really positive that day, kind of like I'm doing the same thing over and over. And he goes, Mark, what's wrong? He goes, you look down. I said, I'm just getting tired of doing the same thing over and over. He goes, well, then let's do something different. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And so that kind of helped, take me in a different direction. And it was, just one of those things where it was an eye-opening experience where I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. And I went, no, I can really kind of pave my own way if I, put my thought process together and really kind of, and that's where you had to kind of make your mark, and you had to say, okay, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to take the initiative to do it. Mm-hmm. And if I could give any advice to people out there, there's so many times that when I was in a position, I wanted to better myself. So I would always propose something to work, the place I was working. I put together a proposal. When I was at WLUM, I put together a proposal saying I'd like to, take over as the operations manager. Here's some of the things I'd like to see happen. And the general manager was thrilled about it. And then they brought in the executive team, and they're like, no, we can't make those moves right now. But I was like, okay, at least, somebody, took, and I think at that point, people start appreciating that you are taking the initiative. They start going, okay, at least this person's thinking about the business. So,
Did you do that right when you were hired, or did you wait a few years?
I was there for a couple of years, and I thought, I was on the air and doing promotions, and I just thought, I really, if I'm going to make any money in this business, I'm going to have to find a different way to do it because, sitting behind a microphone talking wasn't going to pay the bills. So, and, it's one of those things where I think a lot of people have ideas and they don't act on them. I mean, the worst thing can happen is somebody can say no.
Yeah, totally. I know this may be a deep question, but I want to ask it and see what you say. So you drove 2 hours to Chicago, and you were saying also that you got bored at your job. What motivated you to keep going and to keep doing it?
Family.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that really were important to me was making sure that my wife, my son were taken care of. And I'll tell you that when I was a disc jockey, I loved it. I mean, there's perks, there's free tickets to this. People want to be your friend, and but I found out as soon as I wasn't on the air anymore, those people didn't give you free tickets anymore. They didn't want to be your friend.
Yeah.
And I also realized that sitting behind a microphone and making, I think at the time $12,000 a year, wasn't going to be the career path I wanted to take.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I remember. I guess I forgot to mention this on the podcast that you were my instructor at one point.
Yep.
And I remember in class you talked about a passion project that you're involved in called Oscar Mike. Could you explain that?
Sure. Yeah. There's a person by the name of Carol Sellers who I worked with at GMR. She's from Racine, and Carol hooked up with a gentleman by the name of Noah Courier, who is a Iraqi war vet, and Noah went over to Iraq in the first wave, the tip of the spear, they called it, went in and they basically captured, tore down the statue of Saddam Hussein. He had so many stories that he told. Came back, he said, we were war heroes. I mean, when they had parades for us, and it was unheard of, back in Vietnam days, nobody came back to a parade. So he goes, we were riding high, and then he goes, I was with my partner, and he said, let's go back to the base. He goes, would you mind if, would you drive? Because I wanted to catch some sleep because he hadn't slept. So he fell asleep in the front of the vehicle, and the driver went off the road and at a high rate of speed. And Noah became a quadriplegic.
Oh.
And from his standpoint, there's a great video on their website of his story. But his mom was so proud that he was back, and then she gets a phone call saying that your son's in the hospital and possibly dying.
Yeah.
And so she goes out there, and he became a quadriplegic, and he said for the next 7 to 8 years, he just every day talked about, ending in his life. He goes, I just didn't want to put my family through this. I didn't want to go through this. He had a fiance at the time, and then she got killed in a car accident. So his life just was spiraling out of control. He said one day, a buddy of his said, hey, let's go skiing. He goes, skiing? What are you talking about? He goes, yeah. He goes, I've got adaptive ski equipment. I want to take you out to Aspen. So he goes, I went up on top of this hill, and he goes, I just got this adrenaline rush. And he goes, by the time I was at the bottom of the hill, I went, okay, if I can do this, other people can do it. So he started an organization called Oscar Mike. Carol was a person I worked with, and she said, I want to introduce you to this gentleman. And I haven't done a lot of work with them lately, but they're in the midst now of a fundraiser. What they do is they do adaptive sports for injured veterans, and it could be physical injury or mental injuries. And they do everything from jumping out of airplanes to adaptive wheelchair rugby to basketball to you name it. There's I think 20 different sports, but Oscar Mike was a term in the Marines. When somebody said get Oscar Mike, it means get on the move. And so his goal was to try to bring people over who have, bring them into his compound that he has down in Illinois and put them through the program so they can kind of get back into. And he said he started it because he would go to wheelchair rugby games and he goes, well, I see you the next week. And people are like, well, I really can't afford, I've got to, get a caregiver to take me out here. I have to put myself up. And so he said, I wanted to do it for them. So they're building this facility, or they're going to start building this facility where they have their own wheelchair sports arena and other elements on the compound. But it's just a great success story. And I will tell you, he went to Technical College on the GI Bill, got his marketing degree, and he's probably one of the best social media marketers that I've met.
Wow, really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
So if you ever want to go to oscarmite.org, that's all his design.
Okay. I'll leave that in the description for the listeners to listen or to check out too. That'd be awesome. Going back to you being my instructor, what would you say some key components of people for business professionalism should incorporate?
Well, it's funny because the business professionalism course that we taught here has changed quite a bit. It used to be, everybody was supposed to show up in suits for business, and it just isn't, that's not the truth anymore. But
yeah,
I think, key elements are be interesting, be somebody wants to talk to, listen a lot. I think so many people these days are so into themselves that they don't listen to what other people have to say. And sometimes when you listen to somebody, it helps you as an individual grow. And it's also something that, helps you kind of become part of an organization that a team of people that you can count on. I always say too, we have a tendency to get angry at people and to, talk bad about other people, or if we had a bad experience or, writing bad reviews, what about the times that you've had good service? What about the times that things have gone right, or what's something that somebody's done in your life that you could thank them for? And I think I told a story in one of the classes where, there was a time there for a while I just felt so lucky to be in the position I was at that I started thinking, how did I get here? So I started writing down names of people, and I would send them emails and say, I just want to let you know, I'm doing this right now, and I couldn't have done it if I hadn't had your support. And remember when you introduced me to this person and led to this, and just so they went, oh, wow, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. That's cool. Everybody could do that. I feel like I could do it.
Oh,
I should do
everybody. Yeah. Everybody can do it.
And it's so easy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Huh. Okay. And I want to ask your opinion. I know you gave a little bit of advice before, but with your 40 years of experience in the business world, what would your advice be for somebody that's new to the business industry and somebody that could be an entrepreneur or a business owner that's looking to grow?
Be organized. I've started 2 businesses. First one was a small little production company when I was in my early 20s. Lasted maybe 6 months.
Okay.
I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have any thought process into it. I just thought, okay, I know a bunch of people. I can probably do some videos for them.
Mm-hmm.
The next one was the salon that my wife runs. And what happened was I just lost a job that I had. My wife was 9 months pregnant. We just bought a house, and we had no income. And other than her cutting hair. So I was up at the radio station where I was trying to, do a couple of weekend gigs to make a few bucks. And I opened up a newspaper and it said, Racine Salon for sale, owner willing to finance. And so I brought it home and showed it to my wife. I said, I think I'm going to give him a call. So I did. And the guy that was selling it, he and his wife, similar situation. He was a businessman and she was a hairstylist. They had the salon in Racine for several years, and I said, we'd be interested in doing it. Where's the salon? He goes, I'm not going to tell you that yet. And I said, okay. He goes, what I want you to do is I want you to put together a marketing plan. And I said, or business plan. He goes, and I'll send you our financials. I went, okay, whatever that means.
Yeah.
So he sent me a spreadsheet of, what their designers were making. Didn't tell us anything about where it was at. And then my father at the time was had just gotten a new computer with some neat software, so he helped me build some. They weren't Excel; it was called Lotus 1-2-3 spreadsheets that did the financials, and also did a couple of graphs and made it look pretty and put it into a presentation for him. And I sent it to him, and he called me back. Goes, "We'd like to meet you." And I said, "Okay." They probably had no one else that was looking to buy it at the time, to be honest with you. I think he just wanted to see if somebody could, be able to, run the business. I mean, you don't want to see somebody fail. And this guy was a very successful businessman here in Milwaukee. And so he said, we'll pick you up at where my wife worked. So we were over there, and he came and picked us up, and he drove us right across the street to a salon that my wife had seen for years. And she goes, "This is it." And so he said, we'd like to do the deal, and made it very affordable for us. It wasn't one of those things where we had to take out a huge amount of money, but it was a great opportunity. And that's why I say, if you're going to get into business, number one, be passionate about what it is you're going to do. Don't get into business because you want to be a millionaire. It's going to be the wrong thing that drives you there. Mm-hmm. But if you have a business plan, it's a great guide. I mean, you'll see plenty of entrepreneurs that'll say, "I don't need a business plan. I just know where I need to get." Yeah. And a lot of them will be successful. But I think if you manage your expectations, it's also going to help you figure out where your growth is going to be, where your vision is going to be. Where do you want to take the business from, startup to a point where it's worth millions so you can sell it.
For the salon, talking about growth, I know I struggle with setting goals. Did you set goals and milestones when you bought it?
We put projections together, and I was really surprised by how accurate a lot of those were.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was. My dad probably was the person that gave me some advice on how I should project the growth in there, but we were spot on. And my wife was so good at the running of it, just as far as getting people to work together. But like any other business, there's going to be issues along the way, and we had 2 or 3 points where girls up and left, or people had attitudes and wanted to do something else. Some people were had just gotten married and having a kid, and they didn't want to work anymore, and so that changes how you are. And to this day, I mean, it's been 38 years coming up that salon has been profitable since day one. So
wow, does she still love to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we've been talking about retiring, and it's one of those things where she's like, if I'm not cutting hair, I don't know what I'm going to be doing. But she would say to you, if you asked her, she'd say, "I really don't want to manage people anymore, though."
Okay.
So
yeah, My grandma's, I think, 82, and she still cuts hair.
Really?
Yeah,
Good
she
for her.
said she's going to keep doing it as long as she can. It's
Wow.
something like you said, like she doesn't know what she'd do if she didn't do it.
Right.
Because
right.
it gives her something to do. She goes in 2 days a week to the salon and still cuts
That's
hair.
great, and it's great. I mean, to be able to socialize with the people. I mean,
Right.
My wife's clients are like friends. I mean, she's
Yeah.
been doing them for 20, 30 years. So
Yeah, that's how they are. With my grandma calls them bouchas. That's all of her clients are bouchas.
very cool.
And they all come in, and she actually picks them up because like they don't drive anymore. So
Oh,
she'll go
okay.
pick them up and bring them to the salon.
Holy cow, that's great.
Yeah, which is so crazy. But like you said, like, yeah, they just want to keep doing it. It's their passion.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is awesome. Well, I think that's all I got for questions. Thanks for
Great.
sharing your knowledge, and that was super fun.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'd love to do it again with you.
Sounds good.
Keep it going.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks. That was fun.